Hi, Product Mind podcast listeners. Welcome to our show, our chop session for today, whatever you want to call it. We're still experimenting. Today is just me and Ted. Ezinne is in Lagos, Nigeria, and then she'll go to Kigali. She's doing some speaking and consulting. For those who don't know, we spend as much we try to donate our time in the global south for helping upskill people to show them what product looks like, what good product strategy looks like. We want to see an abundant world of software and technology, not just in Silicon Valley. So she's off doing that. But today, Ted and I will talk about the recent developments, namely um, all the continuing investments, incestuous investments in the AI world and the AI economy, but also very specifically OpenAI's launch of the App SDK, which is very significant, at least we think so. And finally, like, what is the fate of the conversational UI? If you look at Substack, you'll see us publish about conversational UI and the trends that we see. So I don't want to give it up, so I'll throw it up to Ted to tee up his thoughts and maybe to frame some of the things we want to talk about.
Yeah, all right. So
Ted?
the big news, this week was OpenAI's release of their SDK, and this is an SDK that basically allows you to hook up your app into their app, and by their app they mean their talk interface. So one of the more notable ones was Coursera, which was announced as part of the OpenAI Dev Days, which was all announced. And that particular interface lets you talk to Coursera as if it was a chatbot text interface, and allows you to basically set up on the fly whatever you may want to learn, and all of that interactivity that you could probably wish for. And I played around for a little bit; it's interesting. But the key here is the SDK. The key here is what they're trying to do with this particular play. With Oji, you and I have seen this before, right? This is the big brass ring play to say we own the interface, and now you want to come through this, you pay us the tax. Maybe in one sense this was inevitable,
Right.
but it's interesting that they're going this route. There are a couple of other routes you could have done, but this is Microsoft 1980s, come again in 2025.
Right. And so just for those who are maybe not following the full implications of this, first you build distribution, right? Windows at one point was used by 10 people, then it was used by 1 million, and was used by 250,000. So you build a great platform that is very useful, which creates demand for it and it rides up. And then you create an app ecosystem. Same thing with the iPhone, right? It started with 1 million people waiting for it in AT&T in 2007, and now it has, I don't know, maybe up to 1 billion units. I don't actually know the numbers. But then the App Store follows, right? People can see the growth trajectory and they want to ride the growth trajectory. Application developers. Just so that people understand, application developers are usually about 80% of the tech industry, right? Platform players take like 20, 30% of the money. But then everything else that makes the platform compelling is the app ecosystem. So OpenAI is aiming to be a full app ecosystem that is as big as Windows, as the iPhone. That is where they're heading. And by building an app ecosystem, app SDK, people can publish apps into their ecosystem, use their discovery distribution strength. Now, what they hope is that it will supplant iOS. It will supplant Windows. And their secret weapon is the conversational interface. Okay? We've talked about this a lot. We did not, at least I did not, I don't want to put words in Ted and Ezinne's because I was the loudest proponent of this.
Yeah,
I did not subscribe to the fact that the text chat interface would be the biggest thing. I am changing my mind. Well,
you heard it.
hopefully, I wanted to say something like, no, people are allowed to change their minds when they have new information. Please do not be afraid of this. I've considered it as a
Absolutely.
hallmark of my personality, and
Fair
the,
enough.
so I'll stop. And this is important. The chat interface. So Ted, before I go on too long and wax quixotic, but you have anything to sort of add to that?
No, I think that is the play. That is the play. I mean, we just posted an article. It's on Substack regarding the longevity of the chat interface, and essentially why it's good and bad, right? But mostly why it's been persistent, even in this age of GUIs and these kinds of things, right? Look, I think the next part of this is really about where we think this is going to go, right? So them having this kind of a vision, look, they have to justify their valuation somehow. They have to justify all the high-powered talent they've got somehow. It does make sense for them to do this. However, I think that the interesting part is this a net benefit or not a net benefit, right? Because you walk down this path, right, with mobile, and what do you see? You see two operating systems, right? You got Android, you got iOS. Windows couldn't make it. Windows Mobile couldn't make it because you couldn't hold more than two in this universe, right? So does that mean we've got Claude and ChatGPT and everything else? Like, have a nice life, good effort, right? Interesting, right? Now, I personally think
So
that's not going to be the case.
no deep seek. Is that right?
Well, I mean Asia, right? But I honestly think that let's talk about the U.S. or at least the English language market. Okay, I think in the English language market, you are going to have plenty of, let's call it, third player. Third player could be anything from custom roll your own to a handful of very customized Gen AI LLM platforms or whatever, right? Very specific to domains or whatever, right? Interestingly, because of the great replacement, literally trillions of dollars that are going to be changing as people rewrite all their applications. The non, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the 10th, the 20th player in this space will probably still be $1 billion business, right? It's just not a $1 trillion business in terms of the gatekeeper, right, to the domain. That's one possible future, or am I being kind of too dystopian?
No, I think you're right. I think that very early on in the 80s and 90s, there's still a lot of consolidation. We went from all the mainframes, IBM, DEC Alpha, all these things, to just a few. Sun Microsystem fell off. And in the end, what remained? It was HP OpenView, maybe Sun Microsystems, DEC fell off the thing. So there's never, when you create these sort of world-spanning platforms, really for business, there's not enough attention to do like 3 or 4, right? Even on the operating system side, what did Steve Jobs' second thing go? He went to build Next computers. It went nowhere because Windows and Mac took out all the oxygen in that space. So in the English-speaking world, the OECD is probably going to be 2. I think you're correct. In Asia, there might be 1 or 2 more. And there's going to be some dark horse open source for everyone else who doesn't want to be locked in. That won't have a lot of distribution. So I think we might see the same kind of consolidation here. This is very important for people who are building, new platforms or who are betting on these platforms. I mean, famously, OpenAI is becoming, and Claude are becoming a little like Windows in the 90s and the 2000s. If you try to raise money in the 90s and 2000s, the question you had to answer was, what happens if Microsoft competes with you?
Right.
And at that time, there was no playbook for this. Like, eventually, we figured out a playbook. Intuit rose under the shadow of Microsoft, lots of companies, and they figured out how to win regardless of Microsoft's platform ambitions and app ambitions. And of course, Google was the best version of this. They took advantage of the web and just sort of disrupted Microsoft in many places where Microsoft thought they were unassailable. But anyway, look, the thing we want people to understand is OpenAI wants to be a platform company as big as the ones that came before it. It's a very good product company. It's a good platform company, really good product thinking. I think Claude is just a step below. I think Google seems to be playing a whole different game. We're not sure what that looks like. And so the names that you hear are the names you'll hear in a year, 2, 3, probably. they won't change. And how you deliver value in this new software world is very, very important. And we'll be exploring how to do that. How do you extract value under the shadow of these big giants is one of the things that we'll keep talking about.
No, I mean, here's my, so I think that's a good picture. I worry about a couple of things, right? So, I think it's a little premature in the race right now for people to kind of lock into this interface. And the reason I say that is that, what is even this interface, right? Text based? Is it voice based? At some point, is it like video based? Right? These are all different modalities, right? I think they may be a little early in terms of jumping into this SDK, and then really basically lock. I think committing people. It's no different than if Windows were to say, okay, we're kind of freezing, where we're at right now, and we're not going to evolve this any further in terms of the way the interface looks because we're ready to start locking people into it, right? I think that's kind of a mistake. And the reason I say that is we have things like dynamic UI happening, right, which Claude has and ChatGPT doesn't have yet, right? We've got, again, other modalities, as I talked about, right? We've got, these kind of, let's call it UIE components, right, that are being threaded in to these text-based interfaces that are different on mobile than they are on desktop, right? So to me, I am concerned that if people are getting locked into APIs right now, right, that's going to inhibit the kind of innovation that we need, because I don't think these interfaces are good enough yet.
So the thing that, circling back to the user interface, um, the text conversation mousetrap for OpenAI isn't perfect, right? Text, in the blog post we wrote, text it has a few negatives. It is it's not very precise, right? A mouse, graphics, and touch are more precise. Obviously, a mouse better than touch. There's a lot of cognitive load because you literally have to read everything. Think like Slack on steroids. The reason why people are so tired of Slack, that's what happens. Everything is linear, right? Information flows in text and conversation from one point to the other point. No one has conversations from the side because there's, it's impossible. And also, look, everyone sort of thinks that they know all the functionality because they can talk and
Yeah,
type,
right.
but you don't. Most people use maybe 10% of Claude's power, right? If that makes any sense. You have to go to the UI to configure the connectors, the MCP servers, blah, 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 blah. So these are all some of the downsides. But the upside is it's conversation. We've evolved for, a million years to have conversation is what makes us special, social interaction. And so because these language models can talk back to us very intelligently, that interface is so compelling to the humans, the human animal. Um, you just feel powerful. You feel like even when you don't. And the feeling is what we connected to the sharp problem thing. That feeling is sharp enough need that people gravitate to it. Now, we think that if you want to do high precision stuff like finance and graphics and CAD and all these, you're still going to need an interface. So we predict, take this to the bank, that these UIs, like Ted says, will have dynamic UI. They'll sprout UI when they need to, depending on your task. But what that means is that all of a sudden, this is all you need. You need chat, dynamic UI, done. You don't need an operating system. You don't need a browser. You need nothing. Like how much of marketing and browsing is done within ChatGPT today? It's astounding. It's just been a couple of years. So
Yeah.
anyway, these things will endure. It seems like they will endure. They won't endure alone. But the primary metaphor is so human because of the response you get is so human that it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me is this the end of really interface design, right? Because
Yes.
if it's always just dynamic, right? In other words, it's kind of, it's always just going to figure out what's the best way in any given interaction to put up that, bit of text together and show a video or do whatever, if some stuff is spoken, right? And it's always going to be dynamic. It may not even be the same. Well, the funny thing is, I think interfaces have been moving this way anyway, even on mobile, right? So I was having this conversation with my son the other day. We're trying to walk through an app, and I was trying to. He didn't know how to do something, wanted me to show him, and I'm like, I actually don't know because they changed it again, right? So the interfaces, even on mobile, are changing so rapidly that it might as well be dynamically generated, right? You certainly cannot say I'm going to go look up how to go do something if you can't. So in other words, it's either intuitive or it's nothing, right? And so this is different because the chat interface can then explain it to you if you are stuck or you don't understand, which is a huge
Yeah.
thing you obviously cannot do on like a purely visual, a mobile experience.
The UI expertise curve we've lived with for the last 50 years, dead, right? Because, I saw 50, 60-year-olds try to use Word 20 years ago, and they were so confused. And also at Intermingle, the first iteration of the app was targeted at, for some dumb reason, I targeted it at, it was very young and fresh. It felt like Airbnb. And a bunch of 35 and 40-year-old people who were networking with LinkedIn were like, what the hell is this? This is too modern for us. We don't understand what it is. But imagine if I could create UI that fit the person, right? So think about when we say dynamic UI, what people should think about is infinitely personalized UI. I'll use in an app. Its primary interface will be chat, or it will look like chat. It'll sprout UI. The UI will be for me. It will work for me. It might look different for someone else, right? This is where we are heading. So which makes like ChatGPT and Claude super compelling because they don't have to do all of that. This is the death of brand kits and all these like design
Right.
design. We've been obsessing about design kits and the maturity model of design for the last 15 years. We're going to see the slow death of this. There'll still be brand things, so brand matters, but it will be about brand voice, brand tone, maybe a few brand colors, but all the UI widgets that are specific to Atlassian, specific to HubSpot with red in their brand and all that stuff. I think that we're going to see a slow decline in the need for that stuff.
Well, so it's interesting you bring that up because I did a quick little video, hot take about Coursera, and the interesting thing, and I talked about this earlier in the podcast, was about when I was playing around with it. I asked it to go, and teach me something in advanced Spanish, right? And it, just for those of you who don't know, Coursera is itself, it doesn't create content by and large. It pulls content, right, from its member, universities. It does rev shares. It does all those kinds of things in terms of their business model. But I think there are hundreds of schools, universities, whatever, that have courses that are on Coursera. And these are asynchronous courses that have, they follow their, structure, right? And they are, when I say they are, I mean the university structure, the way that they've laid it out, or the instructor structure, doesn't matter, but they're branded certainly by the university, and then I think many cases with the professor's name on it, right? The creator's name at least, but I think usually a professor. Anyway, the Coursera didn't give me a choice, right? It just pulled that and just put in the content, right? So I didn't get to choose which of probably 50 or 100 schools offered that particular bit of a module. It wasn't even a bit of a module. It was like one piece of maybe, your Spanish 4 class or whatever. I have no idea, right? No brand other than Coursera's and, of course, ChatGPT, right? So, which is fascinating, right? Because, I mean, I'm involved in higher education here in the state of Connecticut. People, this is a fight to the death to brand, okay? And not just brand by the university, but brand by the professor, right? This stuff is, the lectures, the traditional math, the traditional way is if a professor does a lecture, that's their IP. The university doesn't own that IP, right? So to handle Coursera, there are agreements between professors or their unions or whatever with Coursera and their university. Now we're talking about an agreement on a higher level, even still, that doesn't even have the university's brand on it. Now, maybe that's an oopsie by Coursera. I'm not sure, but it certainly speaks to, hey, your brand, meaningless, doesn't matter, right? Knowledge is what matters, right? Content is what matters. And the only brand is the brand of the software that's delivering it to you, and that's OpenAI.
But do you think that that is done uh, on purpose, or do you think that that is just like MVP type stuff? Like which is it?
Yeah, I think it might be an oopsie, honestly, because they're certainly going to get some pushback on that, from people as they test these things and they go, wait, I just tried that. Wait a minute, you pulled that from my course, okay, and you didn't give me anything for it, right? Like I don't even know what their
Mhm.
revenue model is right now, right? So who even knows? So maybe what it's doing is it's pulling from content that people have already said put into some kind of public domain pool. Like honestly, I don't know how it works, right? But
Mm.
but uh, does it matter? Because let's say it was an oopsie, okay, and now Coursera goes back, and next time they've changed the interface, and it says, okay, hey, you want to go know this, Spanish thing? Here are the 10 possible schools you can pull this from, right? Now, as a user, do I actually see any value add to that? Not really, right? It might be different if it was something that was very, very school specific, right? But in this case, I would have to know that the brand of that school or that particular professor is amazing and I want that particular piece of content. Otherwise, even if you gave me the choice, what am I going to do with that? Nothing. Nothing. Useless. So it is I think making very plain this kind of like brand as value, and it's not the brand as value, it's content as value, right? That's you know that's a
I
paradigm.
just had an epiphany. Brand kits don't they only serve the customer just a tiny bit, right? They don't really, they never have
No,
really,
they're not for the
right?
customer. They're
Like
not for the
if
customer.
we all decided that all buttons will be blue across the world, customers will be quite fine with it. We do brand stuff for us to be recognizable, to be distinct, and so on and so forth. So as long as the content is there, customers don't care. Like they care about familiarity, simplicity. They care about provenance, but your specific brand thing, I don't. You're right. I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you're right. I mean, branding is not for you. Branding is not for the customer,
yeah,
right?
that's
Branding is not for the
correct.
customer. But think about how much value brand stories, marketing have today, right? Brand is your shortcut, right? Because you can't possibly parse all of it. But in a future state where it doesn't exist, and this is not even an agent, folks. We're not even talking about agents. We're talking about just an interface change, right? So it's still asking you, the human, right? To supply the in between. There's no decision making that's kind of human out of the loop, right? This is human in the loop, and still the brand is eroded. Imagine when it's just an agent. Now the brand is utterly meaningless, right? Utterly meaningless. So that to me is a huge paradigm shift where so much of marketing, advertising, these are gigantic, hundreds of billions of dollar industries, right? So much of what they do is about branding. And if it's not branding and it's e-commerce, direct response, or whatever, it's still done under the umbrella of a brand, because the idea being, if you want to build something valuable, people have to be able to come back to it, have it stand for something, and identify it. But now all of that is out the window, right? So a lot more is going to get, I don't know about destroyed, but certainly threatened, right? Than simply just content creators, right? It's the brand value of those people, right? Which is again how they even count, like how not accrue, like literally accrue value. Literally, accounting goodwill is based upon the value of a brand above and beyond its economic value, right? This is like a tried and true mechanism for how we do things. This is all out the window if the brand doesn't stick. If the brand kits are meaningless, if, purple doesn't mean whatever brand, and red doesn't mean whatever brand. Like, okay, now what?
So let's talk about the upside and downside, and maybe if one of the things we learned at Bridgewater was to visualize into the future and think about like the second and third order consequences. So there's a world where brands are eroded and they're funneled through an agent or a chat interface. I think it's so hard to believe that brand value will go to zero, but clearly they won't be as useful. So that's if OpenAI and co maintain their power, right?
Mhm.
There is the other thing where the business world will, it's actually a break. If they don't create brand opportunities, the business world will not adopt them. And so basically the power structure will be from the other side. They need to attract
Right.
apps already governed by brands, and those brands force them to
Right.
put branding inside their application
Yes.
because they won't cede the power to them completely. And so
Yes.
there's a slight tug of, in a world where you have 6 billion customers coming through the chat interface, the brands won't have power.
No.
Okay. In a world where it's 500 million, just like Windows and so on, which had to create brand affordances, then the apps will have power and brands will come into OpenAI, right? So this is a very interesting thing to observe as we go, whether that Coursera thing was a fluke just to launch on Dev Day, or it is more the standard thing that the deal they want to sell. I don't know. It's hard to come down on which side of that is, but I think I'm betting on the apps. We said that apps are like 70% of commercial value in the end, and platforms are about 20, 30%. I believe that the apps will win this one. They might not win totally, because how much branding can you do through a conversational interface? But, but I don't think they win nothing.
Yeah, maybe they just need to be more clever. But I mean, you can imagine, and I think there's been some satire about the future about this, right? But like literally, what do we expect to happen? Like, little like logos start to pop up every time like you have an interface, or like,
No,
it
the ChatGPT changes color if it's Coke,
changes
right? It
color. So you
turns
got
red. It
right,
turns
exactly.
red if it's Coke.
Reserve a color, or like a certain like tone sounds, right? Like a little ditty sounds every time, right?
That would be bad. That would be bad. Okay, I feel like I feel like this we went through a very specific vein of this, but I think it's very important, and I actually think we should circle back to the second and third order implications.
Yeah.
I think the thing that we wanted to leave people with was we're staring at the emergence of completely new platforms. And even with the weakness of how they intermediate, there's no taskbar, blah, blah, blah. The intermediate, it's compelling enough and good enough that it's creating an actual distribution channel that is big enough that it becomes a legitimate ad platform. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, by the way, should we just talk a little bit about the incestuous money? I think we touched on it the last time,
We talked about it. We
but
can talk more. I mean,
but isn't that? But I think it's worth mentioning and laughing about. Like AMD popped 20%,
I know.
okay, because OpenAI said they would buy 6 gigawatts of how are CPUs, the SI unit of CPU is now like what is going on? I am so confused.
Yeah, that I saw that, and I'm like, what the hell? Because I just listened to a podcast about how AMD, was kind of losing the race, right? And and of course Intel lost the race too, to right, and it was like, but of course, some people know like AMD makes graphics chips, right? Which means they make stuff that was used for crypto, which of course now becomes the stuff that was used for AI, right? This was the massively parallel stuff that was originally used for computer gaming, right? That's where the end, the Jensen founded that company was for video gamers, right? So, and AMD, through their Radeon had a big piece of that. And so what happened? So here I am thinking like, oh man, I really need to look at that company because maybe they will catch up and I should buy some of their stock. And of course, like I don't.
I did.
I don't.
I
You
did.
bought it? Oh,
I
nice,
did.
thanks. So I was like, give me some of your winnings. I didn't, and then literally like days later, I see like in another meeting, someone has a ticker and it's like it's up 20%, and I'm like, holy crap! Like what the hell just happened, right? And then so I'm looking for a big announcement. This is not a big announcement, right?
Well, first of all, what does 6 gigawatts of chips mean?
Meaningless.
Does it mean one really giant chip?
It's meaningless.
Or is it just like a way to fudge? Because if you said 1,000 chips,
Yeah.
or you said that chips worth $1 billion, I completely understand. But is there a number? Maybe this is just ignorance. Maybe there is a number.
I don't
But anyway,
know.
you know what do you know there's no money exchanging hands. They
That's what
strike
I'm
this
saying. It's a
deal.
non-announcement.
They say they get an option for 10% of AMD. I'm like, what? And AMD stock goes up 20%, which funds the entire deal for everybody.
Exactly. Now, and of course, this is the kicker, guys, right? This is what's happening here. People are playing with fake ass money because the stock price goes up and they basically funded the deal that they announced, right? With the stock price increase. Now, hopefully, we all know that works great when it keeps going up. And if it stops going up, even plateaus, this breaks, right? Because this works only when it keeps going up. But here we go. That's right. This is a non-announcement. Almost the entire value of this announcement was, oh my God, there's another company that makes graphics chips that might make it like AI chips. Holy crap.
No, but to be clear, I actually spent 2 weekends ago, I was with a very high level AMD engineer here in Austin. There's a lot of chip making in Austin. Samsung, Intel, AMD. Lisa Su lives in Austin. People don't know this. She's a CEO of AMD, for those who don't know.
And who, by the way, is cousins with? Come on.
Jensen. Why you gotta say this? Like, that
Just
sounds
saying.
conspiratorial. Anyway, so AMD is working on AI. The difference in AMD, they make the same things, right? Just to be clear.
Exactly right.
They make the same things. Like AMD certainly has the hardware for the H200 and all that stuff, or the B200, whatever, you know. The problem is for AMD is that the AI industry writes to the CUDA layer. The CUDA layer, which is NVIDIA's own platform, they don't have a CUDA layer. And so now, even like if you tinker like I do with local LLMs, it can be quite a shit show if you have an AMD CPU. Literally, the only reason not to AMD CPUs and GPUs are so good on Windows and Mac, whatever, on Windows, right, and Linux. But if you want AI specifically, you just have to do AMD. You have to do NVIDIA because of that CUDA layer, that optimization layer. People are optimizing training, fine tuning for NVIDIA, and so the market will not tolerate this. AMD will eventually have a CUDA competitor.
Right.
And so this is why people are bullish on AMD. And the stock has been actually elevated for the last year with no announcements because people are betting that they will catch up.
Sure.
And I think it's inevitable. And so this was the first, why would OpenAI buy 6 gigawatts of CPUs? They know something's coming. And then they can actually train and do everything on AMD's chips. And so I think it's just implied.
Either they know something's coming or they, just want to fire off something across the bow and say, we need to hedge against, single sourcing this from NVIDIA, right? Which is kind of what they did with Intel.
Well, why would they do that when the guy just gave them $100 million? Like, I think something's coming.
I guess so. I mean, I guess so. I don't know. But I think it's again, I think what you're saying is right, that some of the people who knew better, right, have been buying up AMD stock, just figuring out that they're a big company. They know this, that they're very similar to Intel. They beat it. They frankly, I think it's pretty clear they beat Intel in the last generation of chips, maybe the last 2 generations of chips, right? CPUs around here. But they had been losing.
And GPUs. That Intel tried to launch Arc and failed.
Oh no, it's garbage.
So just to be clear.
No, GPUs, forget it. But they had been also losing GPUs again, yes, to the CUDA layer, which and all the details there. But here's the deal, though, right? I think that with regards to what AMD can or cannot do, this isn't about any of that. This is about like the meminess of the company called AMD showing up in retail investors who nowadays move the market, right? And there's so much algorithmic trading. This is my former worlds, right? Like that just gets on top of momentum strategy, right? And it because they people know, when I say people, I mean algorithmic traders know, right? And big hedge funds know you can make money riding, these meme stocks, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's happening, I think, in this case, is that you essentially have the meme come out of holy crap, AMD, buy, and next thing you know, woof, right? No different than Oracle, right? None of this in any way is justified by fundamentals. Now, people who listen to this would be like, what are fundamentals? Because no one cares anymore. right? No one could give a
No,
crap.
but I do think so. Yeah, there's no fundamentals, but I think the implication of this, again, second order, is that the linchpin of the current bubble is OpenAI.
Yes.
Anything that destroys confidence in the future value of OpenAI will tank the economy.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That is the thing. Okay, so Ted is about to make a lot of money shorting. And the thing is, you can't short the company. It's not public. It's
I
not even a
know.
for-profit company.
Not
And
yet.
so someone this is didactic. Someone should launch a synthetic index for OpenAI and then short it. That's what we should do. Ted,
That's fascinating, but
next
how would
project.
you hedge it unless? Okay, anyway, whatever. But the point is, I, I mean, how do you hedge that exposure against
No. I was joking, but but if OpenAI's confidence tanks, the economy will tank.
right, right, right. I think you're 100% right. I mean, it's
Sorry, stock market, not economy.
okay, right, fine. The economy, I think, is in bad shape no matter what. Obviously, the Fed does too, otherwise, we wouldn't be cutting rates, right? But back to
Mhm.
this, the stock market. Yes, absolutely, because the stock market is only a few companies, and those few companies are driven
Linchpin.
by
It's a
AI.
lynch. It's the linchpin of the tech. Tech is 30% of the stock market right now,
Yes,
inflated. Right?
well,
PE
right, and then,
ratios
then of
up the
that,
wazoo.
it's like 5 to 10 names, right? Of
And
which
it won't even matter what happens to steel stock. If you
no,
take it out, everything's going down.
no. Again, you look at where the returns have been in the stock market in the last year,
Yeah.
2 years, 18 months, and it is all a handful of stocks. We have seen this, folks, before. Again, don't take any trading advice from us. But our point is this: it's nothing to do about trading advice. It is about to say AI is a linchpin, right? AI chips are a linchpin of the stock market, no question, right? And it is so frothy, it is so memey. Again, I think we've all seen this before. That doesn't mean it's going to all end in tears, although I think it will. But again, when if I knew when, I'd be Ray Dalio. I'm not.
Okay, I think we're gonna end on this note. We put a lot of threads. We started out with a fairly simple announcement, and we put a lot of threads. We'll try to explore some of these that are important and more interesting, especially if you leave comments in the coming weeks. But thank you so much for listening. This is Product Mind, where we try to untangle the reality versus the hype of what it means to be a builder and what it means to exist and thrive in this technology economy. So hopefully you enjoy that, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
Bye, everybody.